What's up, everyone? Clydesdale Chris here. As you can see, the leaves are starting to fall here in Michigan, and that can only mean one thing. Winter is just around the corner, and with that, we wind down the regular biking season, and many of us transition to fat bikes. Yes, I know fat bikes are a pretty polarizing subject in the biking world. Some people love them, a lot of people just don't get them. Let me be honest with you, at first I kind of didn't get it either until I got one, until I rode it in the conditions that they are best at, and I kind of dig it. Just like anything else, I always say a fat bike is a tool, right? It's something you have in your toolbox. It's very good at a specific set of things, but you got to keep your expectations aligned with what it's good at and what it's not good at, because if you expect it to kind of replace your regular mountain bike, you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. If you understand that a fat bike is a great off-season tool, or it's a great tool that be used in wet conditions, sloppy conditions, snowy conditions, or conditions where you just want to rail a monster truck of a bike around and get yourself a lot of traction in the corners and the uphills, even though it's a heavy, beastly thing, you can have yourself a lot of fun with it. Now, some fat bikes are light and some are, well, most are rather heavy. This is my baby. This is the Diamondback El Oso, or Spanish for the bear. And I'm going to do a quick review on this thing because I think it happens to be a rather great value for people who are setting themselves up for, it's not so cheap. I'd say it's super entry level, but it's entry level and you're getting a bike of a high enough quality level that you can really grow with it. You can really use it as it's intended to be used, and you're not upgrading stuff all the time or breaking stuff. It's a very good solution for somebody who wants a good fat bike and it doesn't want to spend a lot of money on it. So the El Oso, it retails for about $2,000, but if you do a little bit of searching, cough cough, corporate discount, you can find it for a lot less, and there are instructions on Google that show you how to get the corporate discount for Diamondback if you don't. Fortunately, I qualify for the corporate discount, so I paid a whole lot less than retail for this thing. And what do you get for this amount of money? Well, you get a pretty solid bit of kit. First and foremost, it's got the RockShox Bluto front fork on it, and to me that was a big selling point because I ride a dual suspension bike most of the time, and going fully rigid is not something I wanted to contend with. I have ridden fully rigid fat bikes before, and I did run into issues with my hands getting a little bit numb or buzzy over time. I really wanted to have a quality front suspension fork, and let me say something about the lower end fat bikes out there. A lot of them have a straight steer tube, and if you get yourself a bike with a straight steer tube, you're very limited as to what kind of front suspension you can put on that thing if you want to upgrade later. I found that out the hard way. I'll get into that in another video. The El Oso has a tapered frame, tapered steer tube, and as it said, it comes with the Bluto. Get yourself a nice hydroformed aluminum frame with a box section down tube here. The component mix is tried and true SLX, which really works well in this application. It's just robust and simple, and it's going to put up with the harsh conditions that you're going to get out on a fat bike. You also get a nice race face crank and bottom bracket setup, which is pretty good at this price point. It's not a 1x setup, it is a 2x10, but to be honest, I haven't had any problems with the 2 chainring front end, and it gives you a really nice low granny gear, which is awesome for crawling up the steepest of stuff. So, brake set is Shimano Diora. Yeah, it's your basic hydraulic setup. It just works. Nothing glamorous about it. You get 180 millimeter rotors front and rear. Cockpit stuff is basic Diamondback branded bars and seat post and saddle. It's got nice kind of embroidered side protection there on the saddle. Tires are Kenda Juggernaut Pros. They're 4.5 inch wide. They're pretty gnarly. I'll get on those a little bit later, but they seem to work great in a variety of conditions. They work good in snow. They work good in loose and muddy conditions. Work good in sand. I've been pretty happy with them for the most part, aside for one caveat, which I'll get to later. So it's a robust bike. So once you get used to riding these things, of course you air down the air pressure, and I'm a pretty big guy, so I run a little bit more air pressure than most, but the flotation you get from the large tires means that when the trails start getting wet and soggy, you can really still ride this bike without having a negative impact on the trails. And that's something people don't talk about with fat bikes a lot, is that kind of extends your riding season in both the fall and the spring, because you can go out on the local trails and you're not cutting big ruts in the trail because you're on these wider tires. You still have to use your judgment. It gets to a point where it's so wet that even a fat bike shouldn't be out there. But I've been able to ride in a lot of conditions that I definitely wouldn't go near on my skinny bike just because of the fat tires. Another added bonus is it's great winter training. I mean, people say things about the weight and the rotating weight of the bigger wheels and tires, and honestly, I see that as a positive. So I ride this thing all winter. It's a beastly 35-pound plus bike with real heavy, real high rolling resistance tires. And it makes my carbon fiber cross-country race bike in the spring feel absolutely lightning fast. So I'm not riding this thing to set the fastest lap time. I'm riding it for A, off-season training, and B, for fun. And the downsides of the fat bike really don't bother me there. In fact, I see them as an asset. So I can go on a shorter ride, right, and get a better workout just because it's big and heavy. So what else is it like to ride? Well, the traction is almost unlimited. So you get yourself in some tight bermed corners and you get that thing railed up, and the handling is absolutely fantastic. You can really feel the traction advantage. The grip just doesn't want to give up. And you got to balance the weight or the tire pressure correctly so it doesn't get too squirmish. But once you get the bike dialed in and you're on the right kind of terrain, it's just amazing how much you can lean this thing over. Now, with the weight of this thing, you need to keep your momentum up. So as soon as you slow down a lot for a sharp corner, you're going to notice that you're going to struggle to bring it back up to speed. So that's when you want to keep your momentum up, get the bike angled through the corner, and use those big knobs on the sides of the tires here and low tire pressure. Really exploit the grip that you get from these fat bikes. So once again, I think this bike really does well in what a basic fat bike needs to do for you. So first and foremost, it just works. All of the components on this bike, they're not the most glamorous, but they're very functional. They've never failed me. And I've ridden this thing in a lot of really harsh conditions, so snow and mud and slop. And, I take care of my bikes, but every once in a while this thing's going to be rode hard and put away wet. And I haven't had any problems with the maintenance and the upkeep on this thing. It's just a burly tank of a bike. And B, it's balanced. It's a nice riding bike considering the price and the weight. I think the geometry works pretty well. I like the short cockpit, the short stem. I tend to want to ride a fat bike a little bit smaller than I would, let's say, a summertime cross-country bike. But it does what I need it to do. So really give this bike a great review. And if you're looking for an entry-level bike, definitely look into the Diamondback. So let me get into the advantages. Advantage, of course, is the price. You get a very solid bike for the price. Another advantage is Diamondback makes it really easy to order this thing. So you go online, you order it, shows up at your door like 2 or 3 days later, and it's 90% ready to go. The assembly is super simple. The instructions are good. They even include a torque wrench and other various things to get it set up absolutely perfect. And I've worked at a bike shop for a number of years, and I have to say that the assembly on this bike was one of the easiest I've done. The cable tension was very close to being perfect. Nothing needed additional attention other than putting the wheels on, getting the seat post in, getting the bars set up. It was really good to go. Last but not least, they also offer a free assembly service if you are not up to doing it yourself. So I didn't look into that at all, but I've heard that they do offer that. So if assembling the bike yourself is not something you would be looking at, I highly recommend you check that out. So being a review though, everything is not going to be perfect. So everything has its advantages and disadvantages. So there are a few tips or a few things that I'd like to point out about the bike. So one thing that did become apparent pretty quick was the paint quality, or the hardness of the paint. After I rode on a few really gritty and muddy rides, I noticed a pretty substantial amount of cable rub on the areas where the cables do contact the frame. And I think that the paint itself isn't the most durable on this bike. You can feel it. It's not entirely hard. So what I went ahead and did is took some of that 3M clear protection sticker type stuff, and I put it on the top tube and the contact areas, and that's done a good job of protecting the coat or the paint job. Also with the lizard skin on the chainstay, that got beat up pretty quickly. It's one of those things I kind of forgot to do. So definitely recommend protecting the bike if you're going to go ahead and ride it in some harsh conditions. Another drawback is I did mention these tires are pretty gnarly. If you go ahead and look up on, I think it's bicyclerollingresistance.com, these are basically the worst tires for rolling resistance that you can get. Now, they are light tires, and they work well in a great number of conditions, lots of grip, but you will be working hard and putting out a lot of watts to be pushing these along the pavement. So be warned that if you want to go fast, if you want to roll easy, you're going to want to change the tires. For my goals, off-season training and beating around in the wintertime and stuff, I'm actually totally fine with that. I don't mind at all the extra rolling resistance. And if I plan to race this thing in the winter, which I'm thinking about doing, maybe I will change it to something a little bit faster for race day. But on training rides, I kind of like the high rolling resistance tires. And last but not least, be advised that their fit guide online, I think, is not quite perfect. So this is actually a size medium frame, 18 inch. I'm about 6 feet tall, and that's usually what I ride, about an 18 or a 19 inch frame. Their advice puts this frame at somebody, I think, 5'7" to 5'10", and they would put me barely at a large, and I think a large would be just too big. I'm totally comfortable on this size medium. I wouldn't want to go much smaller than that, but everybody I've talked to says that their size guide runs a little bit small, meaning they're going to advise you into a slightly bigger frame than you probably would normally ride. So I'm totally cool with this being at about 6 feet tall with the 18-inch medium frame. So that's my review on the LO. So I think it's a great value. I've also ridden a number I had before this. I had a framed Minnesota 2.0, which is a slightly lower end, real entry level fat bike, and it was really good to kind of get me into it. But ultimately, I decided that I wanted something a little bit better, and it didn't make sense to upgrade that bike. It just made sense to get rid of it and start over, which I've done with the Diamondback. So if you're looking to spend just over $1,000, go ahead and check out the best deals on this thing. It goes on sale through the corporate discount portal, and it's a pretty awesome bike. So if you got any questions, hit me up, let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.